We're now at turn 20, roughly halfway through the early game. Remember, this game lasted almost 500 turns. I won't be doing these recaps every 10 turns for the entire game, but for the opening phase I will, because it's simply too important to skip. A Planets game has 3 parts. The first and most critical is the pre-ship limit phase. The game has a universal ship limit that affects all players. In classic games, that limit is 500 ships. Once 500 ships have been built in total across all players, the game enters the post-ship limit phase. Reaching the ship limit typically takes around 27 turns in a balanced classic game, sometimes less, and over 30 in a standard game. So those are the 3 phases. There are also 3 dimensions to planets: logistics, tactics, and diplomacy. In this game, the northern players are doing the best diplomatically, with the robots perhaps leading the way. Over the past 10 turns he has established a trade treaty with the lizards to his right, agreeing to trade a lizard-class cruiser for an instrumentality. To his left he's discussing an intel-sharing treaty with the Evil Empire. The Evil Empire player also has a border treaty, and a non-aggression pact with the colonial player. The lizard player has been approached by his other neighbour, the bird, who has signalled willingness to discuss borders. But the lizard seems very hesitant to engage, barely responding. He appears to be a tough person to bargain with. Logistically, the lizard player is doing best. He has the most ships, and, crucially, the most starbases at this stage, 4. The colonial player also has 2 starbases, and the crystal player has 2 as well, but the other players are not building nearly enough. Tactically, the most interesting action has been happening in the south. Down there, nobody's doing diplomacy at all, the guns do the talking. The Federation and the privateers are meeting at their border, with the Federation beginning to probe into privateer space with a Loki. The privateers, meanwhile, stole a Bohemian-class terraformer ship from the Federation, but the Rebel player has been the most tactically active by far. First, the Rebel used a Falcon hyperjump to reach a planet and execute a Rebel ground attack. He seemed to be hunting the privateer homeworld, jumping away, with the privateers intercepting the ship. Of course, it missed its target. Then another Falcon jumped to a neighbouring planet and jumped away as it didn't find its target. And then another Falcon jumped directly to the homeworld and succeeded in executing a Rebel ground attack there. Over the following turns, the Rebel sent more and more Falcons to RGA the privateer homeworld, and the privateer was not prepared. His Meteor-class blockade runners lacked weaponry to defend. We actually witnessed a Falcon with positron beams destroy a Meteor-class blockade runner. The RGA repeated over multiple turns, and while the privateers eventually captured several Falcons, the homeworld was left in ruins. Now a Rush-class heavy carrier is approaching through open space, heading for the homeworld to deliver the finishing blow. So with his Falcons, the Rebel pinned the privateers down and crippled their shipbuilding. That was their only starbase. But the Falcons were just the prelude. The Rush-class heavy carrier is the ship that will actually decide that obviously brief war. Looking at the map, normally a dropped position is a great boon for neighbouring players to exploit. But here, the neighbouring players don't seem to realise the Fury position is there, and nobody's taking advantage of it. Also, the Borg player has been playing very passively and stops being active around turn 18. We'll see what comes of that. All in all, every player, not counting the Fury, has planets and stuff moving around at turn 20. Now one final and very important topic, ship slots in a classic game. Let's look at what the Lizard player has been building. We can see a stack of Eros-class terraforming ships. The Lizards can use those for the Hisses mission to raise population happiness and generate more money, but they don't need that many Eros ships. So why is he building so many? Well, he's reserving ship slots. This is the planets.nu equivalent of someone at a beach resort dropping a towel on a sun lounger to claim it. This game has a universal hardship limit of 500 ships. There can only ever be 500 ships in the game, each with a slot and an ID number from 1 to 500. If you hold a ship slot now, no matter what ship it is, that slot is unavailable to any other player. Build 5 ships, and you've claimed 1% of all possible ship slots in the game. In a classic game, it becomes very important to reserve ship slots early. Then, at an opportune moment later in the game, you can recycle the ship and replace it with a quality build. Compare this to a standard game, which has a soft ship limit. In standard, you can continue building ships after the limit is reached if you have priority points, which you earn from starbases that could be building but aren't. This means that in a classic game with its hard limit of 500, there are simply fewer active ships on the map than in a standard game. Fewer ships means fewer attacks, fewer engagements, and less dynamism overall. Even players with superior logistics are hampered because they've reserved slots with inferior ships and can't advance. In Standard, those same players would be converting priority points into quality builds and applying overwhelming force. Classic games are slower, more static, and more grinding than Standard, but that's simply the nature of the classic rule set. The best use of small deep space freighters for slot reservation is actually covered in one of the best Planets magazine articles ever written, linked below in the description. It's called The Amazing Small Deep Space Freighter, and it's an essential read. It will make you a better Planets player. Next episode, let's see if we've already hit the ship limit.